The code compiled successfully, but no one stopped to ask what happens when it runs. We appreciate systems that tailor recommendations to our preferences, viewing personalization as a helpful service. However, when algorithms continuously adapt to our behavior, they do more than filter information. They construct a customized environment that subtly directs our choices, changing what we perceive as normal. This tailor-made environment operates without our awareness, nudging us towards specific outcomes. We believe we are making autonomous choices, but our options have been prearranged to influence our behavior. The line between helpful filtering and covert persuasion is incredibly thin. By presenting only what aligns with our profile, the system narrows our choices, directing us toward predictable actions. This directing of choices can erode our capacity for independent judgment. We become dependent on the system's curation, letting the algorithm shape our views of the world and our options. We built the mirror. Our own data is used to construct the very loops that guide us, reflecting our habits back to us in ways that reinforce the platform's specific optimization goals. The core problem is that personalization can shift into algorithmic persuasion. The system does not coerce, it simply makes certain choices feel so natural that we accept them without questioning. Under this design, our autonomous agency is compromised. We develop an epistemic dependency on the curated feed, trusting the system to define what is relevant, interesting, or correct for us. This dependency is consistent with agency loss. The user remains the active chooser, but the criteria for choice have been quietly injected by the algorithm, shaping our desires from within. The consequence is a gradual narrowing of our autonomy. We live in a customized bubble where our preferences are not just served, but actively reinforced and stabilized to benefit the platform. This stabilization raises the stakes of design. When personalization becomes persuasion, the platform gains the power to nudge our beliefs and behaviors on a massive scale without our explicit consent. Now, when convenience and persuasion are merged, users lose the very capacity to resist. The environment is so smooth that noticing the nudges requires deliberate effort that most do not expend. To analyze this shift, we must define algorithmic persuasion. It is the use of tailored recommendations to influence user choices, steering behavior toward outcomes that maximize engagement or platform metrics. Epistemic dependency occurs when a user relies entirely on curated systems for their understanding of reality. It limits the variety of inputs, making independent verification of information extremely difficult. Autonomous agency is the capacity of a person to choose based on their own evaluated reasons. It requires a choice environment that is free from covert direction and manipulative design. The distinction matters between passive curation and active direction. Passive curation organizes content according to user interest, while active direction uses curation to nudge users toward specific, predetermined behaviors. This direction operates through the choice architecture itself. By altering the visibility and accessibility of options, the system makes preferred paths effortless and alternative paths feel difficult or hidden. We must also define user profiling. It is the collection of behavioral data to predict preferences, a process that enables personalization but also provides the leverage needed for covert persuasion. When we accept these definitions, we see that personalization is not neutral. It is an active intervention in the user's decision-making process, carrying implicit assumptions about what should be chosen. Therefore, personalization can act as a vehicle for soft paternalism. The system guides our choices for our supposed convenience, but the parameters of convenience are defined by the platform's developers. The causal mechanism begins with profiling feedback loops. The system records our clicks, scroll speed, and attention, using these inputs to refine the behavioral model it maintains of our preferences. This refined model allows the system to predict our reactions. It selects recommendations that are most likely to keep us engaged, adjusting the feed in real time to prevent user frictions. This prevention of friction is the primary vector of persuasion. By removing the pause where reflection occurs, The system guides our attention down pathways that serve its own metric goals. Not can we, but should we. We must ask if we should allow algorithms to curate our choices so closely that our capacity to choose differently is slowly trained out of us. Over time, the system's predictions can become self-fulfilling prophecies. By only presenting options that match the profile, the system prevents us from developing new interests, locking us in place. This lock-in effect limits our moral and intellectual growth. We are shielded from the cognitive dissonance that often triggers critical reflection, remaining in a state of comfortable, automated compliance. The system's optimization goals are rarely aligned with our autonomy. It seeks to make our behavior predictable, as predictable users are more valuable to the platform's economic partners. When we conform to these predictable patterns, we experience a gradual erosion of agency. We select from the curated menu, assuming we are free, while the menu itself dictates the choices. The designer then deflects responsibility by pointing to user choice. They claim the system only gives users what they want, ignoring how the system actively shapes those wants over time. This deflection shifts the moral burden from the platform to the individual. The user is blamed for their choices, while the persuasive architecture that guided those choices remains unaddressed in code. This gap is where the moral tax is paid. It is a tax on our self-determination, paid in small increments every time we accept a personalized recommendation without conscious evaluation. The convenience of personalization acts as a barrier to awareness. Because the system is so helpful, we have little incentive to question the subtle persuasion that accompanies the service. This helpfulness makes the persuasion highly effective. We are more receptive to influence when it comes disguised as a customized service designed specifically to meet our individual preferences and needs. Of course, personalization is not inherently manipulative. The risk arises when the design prioritizes platform optimization over user autonomy, transforming a helpful filter into a covert tool of behavioral control. Without clear boundaries, personalization will always drift toward persuasion. The pressure to optimize engagement creates an incentive to shape user behavior, ensuring that the system dictates rather than serves. We must examine the limits of this critique. One defensible position is that personalization is essential to navigate the modern web, as uncurated feeds would overwhelm users with irrelevant data. Indeed, personalization provides legitimate benefits. It helps users discover music, books, and resources that align with their genuine interests, saving time and energy that would be wasted on search. A rational exception exists when users maintain active control over their profile settings. If we can adjust the algorithm's parameters, we can use personalization as a tool rather than a guide. One limitation of this critique is that not all personalized systems are persuasive. Context-aware applications like weather or transit recommendations serve immediate needs without attempting to alter user beliefs. Conversely, in social and political domains, personalization carries high risk. This creates an unresolved trade-off between the efficiency of tailored content and the preservation of a shared public choice architecture. A validating case is found in credit scoring. Suggesting related items is helpful, but when the system uses behavioral nudges to trigger impulse buys, it crosses into covert persuasion. These boundaries show that the issue is not personalization itself, but the lack of transparency and control. The moral tax is a consequence of design choices, not technical necessity. To resolve the tension between personalization and persuasion, we must reassert the boundary between help and manipulation. We must design systems that respect user autonomy rather than trying to steer it. This means that developers must prioritize autonomy-preserving design. They must build choice architectures that allow users to understand how their profile is shaped and to reset it at will. We are still responsible. Users cannot use the algorithm's nudges as an excuse for their behavior. We must actively resist the comfortable paths that lead to dependency and lost agency. Reclaiming control requires that we introduce deliberate variety into our digital inputs. we must seek out uncurated spaces, exposing ourselves to options that fall outside our personalized profile parameters. This variety is essential for moral preservation. It provides the cognitive friction needed to keep our critical faculties active, allowing us to evaluate choices before they become automated habits. The resolution is not to abandon personalization, but to demand governance that ensures transparency. We need designs that prompt reflection, encouraging users to question why certain options are presented. By restructuring our relationship with adaptive systems, we can pay down our ethical debt. We use personalization to assist our choices while retaining the final authority to evaluate and decide. This shift requires a change in how we value platform efficiency. We must recognize that a slightly less optimized feed is a small price to pay for the preservation of autonomy. Ultimately, the goal is to align technology with human agency. We must build systems that serve our capacity to choose, ensuring that personalization remains a service rather than a persuasion. As an application, we can start by auditing our personalized feeds. We can examine where we have allowed recommendations to dictate our views, identifying where we feel nudged. The distinction matters. When we actively adjust our profile settings or clear our history, we assert our values over system design, reclaiming the authority to direct our own attention. We can also establish a framework for evaluating adaptive technologies. We should ask who benefits from the predictions the system makes, and what values are embedded in its optimization. This inquiry helps us separate technical accuracy from ethical legitimacy. A personalized recommendation may be highly accurate in predicting our behavior, but that does not make it right to accept. Furthermore, we can identify the stakeholders affected by persuasive personalization. By looking beyond our own feeds, we can see the broader social consequences of algorithmic sorting on public discourse. We must also ask who holds accountability when a persuasive default leads to harm. If a personalized nudge causes systemic damage, there must be clear paths to human and corporate responsibility. This approach preserves the unresolved trade-offs of technology. It does not promise a world without tailored filters, but it equips us to live with them without losing our autonomy. By asking these questions, we make the persuasive elements of design visible. We reclaim our capacity to choose, ensuring that our values rather than platform metrics direct our daily lives. We must decide if we want systems that serve our choices or systems that shape them. The machine is learning. The question is, what are we teaching it?